Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. We are excited we can bring you this important session live via YouTube. At this time, I turn the meeting over to Delaware Secretary of Education, Dr. Susan Bunting.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and good afternoon to all of our listeners and our viewers. On behalf of Christina Loyas, our Deputy Secretary at the Department, I'd like to thank you all for joining us to learn a lot more about the American Rescue Plan, ARP as we fondly call it, and also ESSER 3, which we will explain in a few minutes. This session is important to us because we care deeply about what our stakeholders have to say to us. We have been asking everyone to give us their opinions, their ideas, we want to hear their voices. And so we have been able, through stakeholder.feedback@doe.k12.de.us, gather a lot of the feedback from all of you to inform us as we start to form our plan for ARP. We have until June the 7th to put this plan together. So we really have been depending upon the input, and now we will go to work in putting together the lengthy paragraphs and information that we have to fill in our plan. But much of that will reflect what you have been able to share with us. So today we're going to share some of those basic themes. This is a plan that takes us over the next 3 years. And we'll begin by talking about ESSER, which is what you'll hear us more frequently refer to than ARP, actually, because ESSER stands for the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Monies. And in all 3 stimulus packages, there has been an ESSER amount. And you can see on our slide some dates as to when they were passed and so forth. But I do need to emphasize that there have been 3 stimulus packages. The first one came to us very quickly after we first closed our doors last March in order to help us with the health and safety issues that were paramount. As a State Department, we can pick 10% or less to stay with us. All the other money immediately goes out from these large stimulus plans to our districts, our local LEAs, our charters, which would be both our districts and our charters as LEAs. And then the 10% that we have, we consider serving the entire state. So with our first monies, we really did think about safety and technology. We invested in content filtering for our students who were going to be online so much of the time. We also invested a great deal of our first stimulus package monies in the internet accessibility and then affordability, because we definitely had some internet deserts here in the state. And it was quite important to our students, if they were going to be involved in virtual learning, remote learning, that they have access. So that was a highlight of our first ESSER investment. In the second plan, the second stimulus package, which we don't have a nice simple word like CARES to refer to, but CRRSA monies, the Corona Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act, brought us our second load of stimulus money in the state. Again, 10% stayed at the state level for the Department of Education to invest, and the other 90% went out to the local LEAs. At the State Department, we have concentrated most of our second package of money on things that would really address the academic and the social and emotional support that we know our students have needed and will continue to need. So our largest investment at DOE was our plan for accelerating learning during the summer of 2021, but that money will last a while. And so we have looked at what we might need for the future as well. And now we are considering our spending for ESSER 3, which is why we are coming to you today to share some basic over and over repeated suggestions for what it is that might go into our plan. As I said, we have relied upon the voices from our stakeholders to help us as to how we will invest this third stimulus package. This third stimulus package overall is the largest amount of funding that has been given to public education. 2/3 of the ESSER 3 funds, as you see in front of you, will be made available to our local education agencies, our LEAs, by May the 24th. And then they have a timeline that they have to follow as far as developing plans in order to access the final third of the monies. That is also true for us as a State Department. And if we want to look at some of our very, very overriding ideas, we have some planning that has to be done, and Christine is going to share the basic elements of those plans.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Bunting. And just to reiterate, for local education agencies, our districts and charters across the state, they are required, as well as the state, in order to develop plans to receive the original 2/3 as well as the remaining third. So you'll see that they will be coming and reaching out to all of you as well for feedback for local plans, as we have been doing over the past month and will continue to do as we move through the length of the grant. So the plans must follow specific federal guidelines. You are going to be given an address for our DOE website that we call Everything ESSER. And on that website, you'll be able to get more information regarding those federal spending guidelines and also the different areas that are allowable. The one major point that's been made is we need to act upon this with urgency. We know that we're just finishing up this school year, and I know we're already planning and getting prepared for the reopening next school year as well. So these funds through 1, 2, and 3, they all are blended together to help us in order to make that happen. So probably paramount to everything in all considerations when working on these plans is the fact that we need to give priority to students who have experienced the greatest disruptions in learning due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're looking very specifically at feedback that we're receiving from a variety of stakeholders so that we know we are across the state looking at all of our students and our families and community needs. So again, DOE is working together with districts and charters in order to gather these ideas. And again, as Dr. Bunting mentioned earlier, we're seeking public input. Though our plan is due on June 7th, again, the life of this grant is 3 years. So we will continue to take feedback on ways that as we move forward and learn more, we can add to our efforts. So with that being said, Dr. Bunting has a few common themes that emerged from the feedback we've received thus far.
Christine, I'd first like to thank again our general public for giving us a variety of ideas, but there were some things that occurred repeatedly. They seemed to show up over and over, slightly different phrasing, but the same general ideas. And basically they went into the need in many of our stakeholders' minds to return to in-person learning. Everyone has been asking about what happens in the future, and we're waiting day by day because things have been changing. They also have talked to us about reducing the class size with great interest in meeting the students' needs and making sure they get all the attention that they need. And that has included also some improvement for our infrastructure. Along with that additional support is the idea that we could and should hire more teachers. And there has been a real focus on the social and emotional learning and the social and emotional mental health types of things that our students have exhibited. So give us a few examples of those, would you please?
Yes, so on each of the following slides, you're going to see the top part where we have some buckets of items that we have taken much of the feedback and put them into. On this first slide, these are just samples of some of the feedback that we received related to the common themes that we heard repeatedly. So again, looking at infrastructure, looking at people power, right? People rather than programs, which we hear often and we agree with. We also talked about the idea that we're going to need a lot of support for our students coming back. So maybe possibly smaller class sizes or additional positions available in order to address those needs. So again, on each slide, as we see moving forward, and I'm going to head to the next one, as a department, we then said, all right, let's look at all this feedback and see if we have some overarching buckets that we can begin to look at and begin our planning. So one that, of course, was at the front of the pack was around learning and learning acceleration. So what are some ways that people have reached out and said, we really would like to see a focus on this, especially for those disproportionately affected by the pandemic? And Dr. Bunting, we have a couple samples here.
We do, and I'd like to highlight that part about the disproportionality. Some of our students have really had a greater impact. They've been more greatly impacted by COVID for a variety of reasons. And we often will talk about that, and also those students that we have felt have been minimally engaged in the past year. So as you take a look at some of these samples, I'm not going to read them for you verbatim, although frequently the boxes do include verbatim statements by our folks. But you can see that there are mentions here about helping those students who did not perform well. Some of our students have done very well with remote learning, but others have struggled. You'll also see mention of materials that districts and charters need and could use to communicate better. So you'll find also this general theme of working with our students, but also with the parents that have pitched in to help us with the education this year. And you'll also see a mention of the CBOs, which to us are the community-based organizations that have been so helpful to us and have expressed continued effort and desires to do more to help our students in their communities. So there's a sharing of materials, a need for materials, as well as collaboration in order to, again, best meet the needs of those students who have experienced the greatest disruption to their learning.
And Dr. Bunting, before we jump to the next slide, I just wanted to put a pitch in real quick for those who may be listening tonight. If there are other community-based organizations out there that we have not contacted or that our families are aware of that might want to participate, we would love for that to also be submitted to us at our stakeholder feedback email so that we can reach out. So next one, Susan.
The social and emotional behavioral health is of great importance to the people that have given us feedback or input. Everybody seems to be aware of it, and our staff members as well are listed in that concern. So re-engaging school communities. Some of our students this year have never seen their teachers. It's been a learning experience for all of us. And that seems to be a general feedback theme that has emerged again and again. So give us some examples, Christine.
So, as you had mentioned earlier, Dr. Bunting, some of our ESSER II funds have also been spent to put together supports for mental and social behavioral health. So, we know that ESSER III monies will be doing the same because this is an area that comes up repeatedly and we know needs to be a focus. We got lots of feedback around the fact that we need more mental health professionals in our schools, that we need to look at some daily integration of practices that help to support these needs. And also paramount is how we can work with outside agencies to support this as well. So another bucket that we've seen and we addressed earlier with our initial monies in ESSER I, and of course continue to do so with ESSER II, and now ESSER III, is technology and the digital divide. So this is an area where we know that though we made great strides in providing additional access and affordability for students and families across the state, there is always more room to show growth. Susan, do you want to share a little bit of the examples that people submitted?
Yes, we've talked previously about the investment of some of our CARES money in internet access, and that continues to be a challenge in certain places. We've done a lot to connect our families and to also, as I mentioned, help with the affordability piece as well as just the availability of internet. But it's always one of those situations where we could use more people to help us. And while we're talking about our internet access, I would like to give some attention to our partner from the start. Our Department of our DTI, Technology and Information, has been extremely helpful to us and has worked hand in hand with us to make sure we can provide the best access for our students to internet so that they have the availability of our teachers and our materials that are electronic in passing through this last 14 months of learning. So a shout out to DTI. But we do have many things that we've learned from the experience. Our teachers have had to learn pivoting very quickly into a digital world. Some of them have not had all the equipment that you need. So sometimes you'll see the request for additional information for our classrooms, both for teachers and for our students. And often that is something in the classroom that our local LEAs, our districts and our charters have actually invested some of their ESSER monies in. The enhanced student support is always going to be there. And I think we've learned a lot about using our data and our technology to help us find out more about students and how they do interact and learn very quickly. So using even the platforms that would enable them to invest energies and go through such programs as Schoology to help their learning have been in place. So we will continue to work at how do we advance learning through technology, and how do we make sure that that digital divide doesn't widen.
Mhm.
Connected also to this, and I mentioned some of our connections with community-based organizations, but families have been critical to our success in the past 14 months since we first closed our doors because of COVID. The community engagement, the offerings from community groups, from churches, from various organizations has been critical, and families have been our second teachers because many students have had to have the help, the assistance of their parents or caretakers in getting through this past year when they're learning remotely. So a lot of kudos to both our families. We thank you, and our community organizations that have been our partners in making this last year as successful as we can possibly make it. So give us some examples, Christine.
So we got a lot of examples underneath family and community engagement. And really the crux of most of the feedback was helping people to engage in the different activities that will help to promote social emotional learning. How do we connect our families with community organizations and vice versa? Making sure we have a variety of activities for students to explore beyond the regular school day. And now summer is coming up very quickly, and what's going to be available for our students throughout the summer months. You know, we also saw the fact that, someone suggested that we hire a dedicated staff member just to focus on overseeing this work, because this is a huge task to undertake across the entire state and so integral to the success. And the other was also funding the use of counseling programs with trauma-informed providers. So how do we engage and meet families where they are located? In some areas across the state, and we know Dr. Bunting, having been a superintendent in Sussex County, can attest to the fact that in different areas across the state, there are different levels of support available for our families when it comes to trauma-informed providers. So what are some different ways that we might be able to reach out to our families from Sussex, Kent, and Newcastle County? So that's the buckets that we had taken the majority of the feedback from and tried to consolidate, and will be the areas that we'll be working on as we start to develop our plan. Susan, do you want to round us out?
I would be glad to, with two websites that are really critical to understanding and for watching the developments as we go further with our ARP plan creation. One of them is the site that Christine mentioned earlier, where everything ESSER can be found. This gives you a deep insight into the funding lines, the process for accessing monies, how we're doing things. It gives you information about our summer programs. Everything related to ESSER 1, 2, and 3 will be on that website. So it is a treasure trove of information. The second website that we're featuring on this slide is the one that we have been using to gather input from our stakeholders. We value, as I mentioned earlier, all that you have to tell us. We want you to continue to enter information. We will be summarizing much of it, as I mentioned, to develop our plan that must be submitted on the 7th. But that first plan will have to be a bit more general than it eventually will be, because we don't have, for example, student data back, and we need that to guide our work and our focused efforts for both this summer and then what happens in the fall. So we will continue to look at what comes in from our community members, our parents, or so forth, our students, if they'd like to put things in there. And that will continue to inform us, because every 6 months, we need to go in and revise our plan. And that is true for the local education agencies as well. So this website will be invaluable to us, not only now, but as we move into the next 2 or 3 years of planning and then implementing what we have laid out in our plan. And all of that will reflect what you have to tell us. So our communication lines are open. We really want to thank you for listening. And anything else, Christine, you'd like to say as we thank again our public?
I think you did a great job wrapping that up, Dr. Bunting, and just knowing that let our community know that we are committed to being collaborative and transparent, and therefore we'll continue to have these updates as we move forward, and everything will be shared on our Everything ESSER website.
We thank you all.
Okay. Thank you.